Good afternoon. A very warm welcome to this Critical Thinking Live. My name is Dharmendra Kanani, Director and Chief Spokesperson at Friends of Europe. I have the great pleasure to invite and speak to Nina Angelovska, a former Minister of Finance from North Macedonia, but also a digital guru, a digital entrepreneur who has worked in the territory. And as she says herself, she's walked the talk on terms of how to combine technology and entrepreneurship to close the gender gap. So that's the topic of our conversation for the next 20-25 minutes, which is how do you combine and ensure that technology and entrepreneurship can close the gender gap? How can it enhance economic empowerment of women? And what does it do to that enduring gap we have in terms of different opportunities for men and women simply because of their gender? And how do we address systemic discrimination? Whilst that's not the topic of this conversation, what we're going to look at is solutions and what barriers need to be overcome and the role government can play and others to make sure we can create not only a level playing field, but a field of opportunity that women access as much as men. So it gives me great pleasure to introduce Nina. Nina, you've been a very successful entrepreneur. If I can quote, when you set up, you founded the North Macedonia e-commerce platform Grouper.mk, which contributed to a massive 350% increase in sales in the country. That's phenomenal. So you are someone who obviously before you entered politics knew what it was like to create your own digital enterprise. So on that note, can you share with us what you think government should do based on your own experiences, Nina? What should government do to prioritize this opportunity that you found, and perhaps share some of your own experiences around it, but what should government prioritize to close the gap of gender inequality, but by combining entrepreneurship and digitalization? Over to you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me today here. It's a pleasure to discuss on such an important topic because actually I believe that technology can solve many problems in terms of giving and empowering women and entrepreneurship we are discussing today, but also fighting corruption, solving other problems that countries and governments are facing. And very importantly, it increases productivity, which is in turn key factor for economic growth, and especially what we are seeing nowadays with the situation that the world is facing, crisis after crisis. So on the other hand, the underrepresentation of women is an issue for all over the globe. So basically, for instance, because we are discussing for Western Balkans, maybe mostly, Western Balkans is losing around 18% of GDP due to low representation of women in the economy in general. So now this is the general discussion that we are having is actually how to untap the potential of technology and entrepreneurship for women in particular. So as you mentioned in your introduction, I'm somebody who has walked the walk. I started and co-founded the leading e-commerce platform in 2011. That's the time when basically internet penetration was low. People did not use the payment cards to buy online. The situation was far, let's say, worse than nowadays in terms of there was no market basically. And this is the role of entrepreneurs, to turn those challenges into opportunities and drive innovation, open new jobs. So that's why we are discussing that entrepreneurship is key for economic growth. And this is why governments should prioritize this as an issue in their agendas and strategies. So the first step is, of course, to be aware of the missed potential and what entrepreneurship does and means for the economy and for the economic growth. For us, what should governments do? What we faced lots of challenges because we basically entered industry that was not developed at all. E-commerce in 2011 was basically non-existent in North Macedonia. So we are recognized as the game changer because we practically overcame lots of challenges. We were the ones going to the ministers, to the government, saying things need to change because you need to create an enabling environment for entrepreneurs, for startups, for e-commerce to grow and develop. And this is actually how facing these challenges and overcoming brought me to co-found the Macedonian e-commerce association and try to push a bit more from the side of the representing the whole industry in Macedonia. So I would say that.
Yeah, go on. So I'm sorry to cut across you. So I'm really am sorry to cut across you. But what I want to know is specifically, you were finance minister in North Macedonia. What did you do, or what would you say, based on your experience, like what are the specific things government should prioritize to make sure that people like there are you so that make sure that there are 1,000 of you, Nina, doing different things, for example? What does it take to make government do that?
I think it's not only the role of the government, but it's recently I was speaking at a conference that had a title "Supporting Women in STEM. It Takes a Village." So basically, it really takes a village, and in this village, we have the government, we have the NGO, we have the private sector, we have the parents who need to infuse this entrepreneurial mindset thinking since we are very little. Because 80% of our brain actually develops until we're 5 years old, is the education system, is the teachers. So basically, the role of everybody is important, and everybody should be accountable and trying to push things. I recently, when I was speaking at this panel, we are taking a look at the progress being made, and speaking now broadly on gender equality, for instance, there is the data that if we keep with this pace, the progress is too slow. It will take us 250 years before we see equal opportunities, representation, and pay for men and women. So if this village was a company, I guess everybody would be fired by now, because we are not producing results. We're too slow. So I think many things need to change, need to transform. And this is the role of government, is to create an enabling environment, to incentivize, let's say, women to change the educational system, and try to also engage parents and home growing, because this is a very complex issue, and we are not going to see results like this, but there are measures that we can do that might produce results on a shorter term, and there are systematic transformation that we need to do and reorganize ourselves, because it's really hard to be an entrepreneur, and we need governments can play a key role into making this path easier. Now, I think that we should not discourage, because it's entrepreneurship, let alone itself, is very hard. It takes a lot of hard work, sacrifice. It takes a lot of commitment, learning on a daily basis, new things, new tools, especially in the digital world. And I think that nowadays we are not discussing, actually, whenever we say entrepreneurship, we think of digital entrepreneurship, because there isn't any single industry that doesn't have technologies or digital tools within it. Even the company that I co-founded was a very old traditional model dated since the 18th century that was transformed by the technology and got a new form of something that already existed decades or centuries ago. So I would say that we all need to care. We all need to believe that we can, each and every one of us can make a small change. And we need to put our words into action, because having strategy, having priorities from the perspective of government is not enough.
No.
Somebody needs to, say, okay, now we need to implement all these things. And this is where we lack, I think, where we are not so good, the whole region into implementation. But just a small other note, I actually was incentivized, and I co-founded the company because I won the most innovative business plan competition that was organized, and I got a small grant to start the company right after I graduated. So maybe my path would not have been the same, or I wouldn't have started right away the company when I was 21 years old, right after graduating. But I think that this is just an example of these incentives and grants and measures that all governments and regions are basically introducing can provide certain results. However, this was not a program of the government when I won this competition. It was organized by the Faculty of Mechanical but by some other programs and the NGOs. But nevertheless, the government is implementing this kind of measures, and many other governments are. But as I said, we need to, it's a complex issue, and we need to try with all means and mechanisms that we have, and then see the results, what works, what doesn't. Measuring is very important, and then, adjust and and try to.
Sure, Nina. I'm glad you framed it this way, because I want to move into a question. The issues around choices and opportunities. And what I mean by choices is the individual motivations and incentives that people get, receive, or have. Okay, and that could be because who you're born into, where you're born, etc., and the opportunities you have. Okay, and we know majority of the population of the Western Balkans are not in an economically sound position. Most people are poor. They come from very poor circumstances, and when you double down on that, when you come to women and girls, it's even worse. We know that. So there's something about what do you do amongst women as parents to encourage the opportunities that this could be a pathway. The second is what happens in schooling that enables you to make those kind of choices. And you've just spoken very, importantly about the issue that having an opportunity to test something. So having a small grant to have almost like an ideas grant that either government or someone does was something that actually propelled you to move further. But can you comment a little bit about childhood, parenting, schooling, very briefly if you can, because I think those are, that from my perspective, anyway, at least, or our perspective, those are key moments in time to make you the success you are.
Yes, I completely agree. And I think that it all starts with the home growing. Of course, there is the genes, but I think that what we are absorbed, what our parents teach us, and then what the schooling system does is key for further having either more entrepreneurs, either more women who are more ambitious, who are not afraid to aim higher. And we are all fighting the prejudice that we are seeing all over around us. I know that it's much more difficult for women to prove themselves, to walk the walk comparing to men. However, I think that as you framed it, basically parenting is key. The system, the educational system, should start with entrepreneurship and technology. If you ask me, even right after kindergarten, because we need to develop this thinking. But however, no, we are not aiming to make everybody an entrepreneur. Not everybody should be or can be or want to be an entrepreneur. As I said, there is for me, it was a hell of a ride, but it was a rewarding ride. I loved every bit and moment of the hustle, of the hard work, of the sleepless nights and everything, because it was providing results. And it's what motivates you and keeps you. Besides, we were recognized, and recognitions is an important motivator for all entrepreneurs and women to keep on when it's not so easy. And on the other hand is the mentoring programs, the role models later on. So basically, I think it takes a village, and it takes a lot of different measures. It takes a lot of organizational, structural, and transformational things that governments need to do. But first, they need to be aware and have a clear vision and strategy that we want to create an enabling environment, want to produce more entrepreneurs, especially give opportunity for women, and because they are underrepresented, and we need to unlock the potential for the good of our economy, and then try to combine all these things, and very importantly, to see and cherry pick best practices, what other countries and governments have done, and try to bring them and implement. And a brief comment on what you said on the grant. I think it's it's important, because here basically the risk is absorbed by this grant to test the idea. For us, it was a small grant. It was 5,000 euros grant. It looked like a lot of money to me back then. It was in dinars, a lot of digits. It was a big check that I got. But it really pushed me into founding a company, starting and being, let's say, beginning my entrepreneurial journey. So not all we know the numbers of how many entrepreneurs succeed. Of course, many will fail, but many will learn, and this is worth a learning process, meaning the cost that these programs provide. And there are a lot of programs, for instance, in North Macedonia for self-employment, for, let's say, subsidies, for increasing the number of employees. There is certain measures that give positive discrimination if the company is digital, if the company is founded or led by women. For instance, there were interest-free loans. So there are certain things that that are packed good, but at the end, of course, we need to measure and see the results and how we can improve things, because anything can be done better.
Yeah, because I wanted to move on before we wrap up in the next 5-10 minutes, is the role of money and private sector, because we've touched about the role of government to a certain extent. And as you say, when I think about and reflect on what you just said, that there is interest-free loans for women particularly that may engage, which is great. So you need risk money in this territory for both men and women in terms of entrepreneurship. We know that. In terms of when you've got young people testing themselves and testing ideas, you need to have failure money, if you like. Many people talk about it, but very few do it. Is actually to say, if you fail, you learn probably much more from that. But risk money is important. You said that's possible. You're doing that in North Macedonia, you say. But in terms of when you think about the kind of scale-up money, so the role of money from government money and private sector money, when public sector money is more about patient capital, I'll call it that, i.e. giving you the freedom to fail, giving you that little bit of money to say, actually go and fly, but there's a net underneath you in terms of you won't go bust. What kind of relationship do you see between public and private sector in that journey of being an entrepreneur?
Yeah, I think it's the cooperation actually is very important in terms of everybody needs to play their role. As you put it, these interest-free loans or grants or that the government is providing, part of these measures that I mentioned was actually measures that we designed during COVID to help companies transform, to help them embrace new digital tools. And there was a 30% component that provided grant. This was EU supported measures that were implemented by the Development Bank. But nevertheless, I think that the role of the private sector is as important as the role of the government. However, you mentioned, that this is like money to try and see if it works. But of course, it's not enough if the whole platform and enabling for growth is not there. So there are, for instance, new accelerator programs appearing, especially in the past few years in the region. There is regional cooperation as well, because all countries in Western Balkans are pretty small if you take a look at each one of them separately. So the cooperation is very important, and we need to provide also market of integrated market. Basically, the CEFTA market and idea is actually to provide a market of around 20 million people for companies to easily expand to other markets. However, that was not the discussion, but I think that the private sector in terms of investing is getting more and more alert. There is a movement in this area in terms of course, it's much more difficult because when an angel investor or when VC is investing, it wants clear return on investment, clear exit strategy. And this is, of course, good because, on the other hand, entrepreneurs need to have this in place, need to learn through this process. And I think that there is room for improvement. There has been some movement, but there is still a long way to go. The private sector, for instance, can encourage not only monetary value, encourage by being role models, certain startups or companies, by providing support to startups and smaller businesses, rising stars, let's say. So for instance, just because we're discussing on gender and technology and digitalization, we launched a new initiative in the Macedonian E-commerce Association. It's called Gender Equality Alliance. It's an alliance for gender equality focused in the workplace. So what we are actually doing is we cooperate also with the government and private sector and academia, but our goal was to provide and to give a platform where the private sector can take a leading role into promoting gender equality in the workplace by promoting equal pay, equal opportunities, and equal representation. So I think that as I said, everybody in the village should contribute and should give its let's say its contribution, its actions in order
and take
for us to
responsibility
Yes.
take responsibility.
Yeah.
Nina, that sounds like a brilliant example. Two very last points. One, firstly, I wanted to thank you for being a part of our Women's Economic Empowerment Group, which covers the Western Balkans, which we launched, obviously, in Albania, in Tirana, less than 2 months ago. And so we're really pleased to have you as a part of that initiative. And as you know, it's over 2.5 years where we're looking at what are the things governments, private sector, or the village can do, if you're using your terminology. Do you see the issue of women's equality, women's empowerment, women in politics as a way in which we might overcome some of the differences in the Balkans, which we see, which are mostly led by men, we know. But the irony is that in the Western Balkans, we've got more women in power politically in the shape of that, the small conclave of 7 countries than we have anywhere else in Europe.
Yeah.
What's stopping the development do you think in terms of creating a groundswell where women's economic power could be a real driver for economic growth if some of the women across all the Balkans locked hands? No?
Yeah, I think that you put it very well, and the region is not performing so so bad. Actually, it is performing, comparing to other countries who are doing worse, is performing, let's say, satisfactory to a certain level, but it has still a long way to go. Now you mentioned the region and that there are many more women into politics. Let's take a look at Albania, where over 70% of government are women. And I even think, and I often joke that let's gamify actually this complex issue. Let's say, because the UN publishes, this content and posts, and they say there isn't any single country that has achieved gender equality. It was basically an image of 10 empty bullets. None of the countries has reached gender equality. So I think maybe we can even make a contest and say which will be the first 10 countries who will achieve gender equality, because at the end of the day, it was a very good promotion for Albania, for instance, for the country to say we are the first country that has over 70% of government are women. However, it's not only about the quantity, but it's also about the quality. If you have asked me a few years ago if I am for quotas or not, I probably would have said that I am not, that everything should be free flow as it is, that anybody should not be given special treatment because of the gender, race, nationality, but we are striving for equality. But on the other hand, when I was speaking with one woman, she said, I'd rather be employed because I'm a woman than not be employed because I'm a woman. So basically, I think that nowadays, maybe we need positive discrimination, maybe we need quotas. We can see some of the Scandinavian countries who are implementing these kinds of measures, and they are providing results. So I think that if we have, of course, more youth, when we are creating policies for youth, it's better because you will have somebody who will say the challenges. If we have more women, probably we will be able to create better policies. However, I don't think that better policies come from women for women, but come from diversity. Actually, it's not that we say women are better, and that's why they should be included more. But we are all diverse and we bring different values. And in order to look at the problems of the world as a whole, we need all angles. So I think that is the key, actually, is that equal teams perform better in terms of sales, performance, results, leadership, and definitely we need more women in decision-making positions. But however, as I said, it's a very complex issue, and we need to also encourage and work on the ambitious leadership ambitious gap. We need, and governments can play a key role to try to break also the prejudice that women should do all, women should take all in the home, and I think that there is still a long way to go, fighting prejudice, home growing, schooling, and then these programs and incentives and support systems, and we really have a long way to go, but I am always optimistic and positive that we will try to speed up and be, when we discuss next year, say the progress is better now. I hope that if we manage to do that, we will be satisfied.
Absolutely, Nina, it's so important to be optimistic. And, I pose that question because people will think, there's this huge representation of women in the Balkans, Western Balkans, and yet the figures still keep on sliding in the other direction. And you make the right point, why should those who've been underrepresented historically suddenly solve the world's problems just because they've got into power? I think it's important that women are experiencing what it is to be in government. And, just like men, there's going to be some who are going to fit in and just do the job they need to do. Others will be more ambitious and more confident in their skin and be able to lead things. And why should we expect any different or more just because it's women? But the most important thing is they're in power, and let's hope that people can work together to move the dial on inequality. My final question to you is about extension, and I could not have that question to you, albeit our new Balkan journey isn't all about joining the EU. It's more about looking from the inside out. But I feel that on this issue, do you think the EU could be doing more and better in terms of its approach to extension, being much more about gender equality and using gender empowerment as a basis to improve things?
I think that the maxim is always that I'm using that anything can be done better. There is room for improvement always. So, there is a lot of room for improvement, and definitely I think that putting gender equality, women empowerment in focus is a logical thing to do, especially now when we are fighting with and trying to boost and foster economic growth more and more, and we need to double and triple the rates of economic growth. And if we simply take a look at the numbers and we say, well, if we include more women, actually we are going to have 20%, 16% in the Western Balkans increase in growth. So logically, it would be that we should focus a great deal of the resources, because it will provide economic growth. And also for the region, taking a look at the perspective inside out, I think that we should do it for ourselves, the region, for our countries. It's not to tick a box and to say that this is something that EU requested, so that's why we are doing. It's the same in business. When I was heading the company, I said, I need you to understand why we are doing this and what it will provide. So, however, I think one of the challenges of the region, especially now with the pandemic and with the change of the digital economy, is keeping actually the brain drain, or actually finding and growing skilled workforce and people that will want to contribute and will want to work. Because for ages and years, we've been stimulating people who want to take the salary and work less. We need to change this as well. And as I said, I think that we have a long way to go. Our countries, the Western Balkan, the role of the NGO sector and organizations like yours. And for instance, I am an E-Trade for Women advocate in UNCTAD. We do a lot of programs to increase the digital skills, because this is an issue for women as well. They're more educated, but if we take a look at the quality of the skills, and if these skills will provide high-paying jobs, it's not the case. So we need to take a look at the deeper dive and try with different measures. And as we said, anyone can contribute.
Sure.
From its position, and we should try to make small steps, because that will probably bring to bigger change.
And Nina, I mean, it's well said. There's an irony in this stalemate about extension, isn't there? That actually Europe wins each time. It's keeping an eye on making countries jump through hoops, but ultimately Europe benefits because all your young people want to come into the EU, and the EU benefits from skilled labor that's going to be cheap, labor that's flexible, and it's a crime actually.
Yes.
But people need to really get their act together.
And the landscape is completely changed, because people who live here, actually it's a different sort. It's not a brain drain. So maybe the remote work is bringing good to our economies, because people stay here, live here, work for other companies in other markets, get paid here. pay certain taxes to our economies and spend their money here. So at least we should try to make their life better and attract people who will want to stay here, return here, or live here with good organizational, with good system, education, healthcare, and this is something that we should work on as well and focus.
Finally, Nina, and it's been lovely speaking to you. I want you to convey a message to a young teenager, a woman in the region, whether it's North Macedonia or anywhere in the Balkans, right? She's watching what's happening to her life. She doesn't come from a middle-class background. She comes from a poor background. And she's on social media. She could see what's happening elsewhere. What do you say to her to motivate her and keep her in the Western Balkans?
Yeah, there are many examples of girls and women like this, unfortunately. On the other hand, as you said, she's watching on social media. So basically, social media is a new platform where we can transfer our messages, voice, encourage women and girls, not only Western Balkans, but broader. They can, on the other hand, learn many new tools thanks to the digital world, the internet, the technology. So I would say that the goal, even with incentivizing and with encouraging and with mentoring, is not to give them a fish, but to teach them how to fish. So basically, I think that the skills and having the mindset that my greatest strength comes from knowing and learning, I would say them to try to grab all the knowledge that they can, because that is, at least according to my story, this is how I managed to not be afraid, to be confident when I would go and discuss with in a room full of men in suits and directors and ministers and so on. So I would say to be brave, to be confident, to gain knowledge, to aim high, and to believe that they can really make a change. And if they have a dream, they should try and pursue it. They should try and open their eyes to see if there are any incentive programs where risk-free they can try and test themselves. If it doesn't work, then they would try something else. And I would say that we should all find the problems we love solving, because there isn't a place where we would escape problems. But the key in life, I think, is to find the problems that we want to solve. So life is for experiencing, for success, for failure, for learning, for meeting people, networking. And I should say that we should all try to make the most out of it.
Great. Nina, thank you for responding. It's a challenging question, I know, but an important one, because actually much of this is about that kind of personal space, but the structures in which young women live in. And the key to the opportunity is to make sure those structures can be adapted, but also for young women to have the confidence to actually negotiate them and actually feel confidence that they can actually be the agents of change, which sounds ridiculous to say, but you know it's possible given your experience. It's been a real pleasure speaking to you, Nina. Thank you for making time to speak to me. And for those of you who've been watching, listening, you can find more information about our Balkans journey, especially our Women's Economic Empowerment Group. And we should be in the Balkans again in early September. We're just looking for a willing partner who's going to host us, but hopefully we can be there very soon. If you need further information about the actual work we're doing in the Western Balkans, don't hesitate to our website. Nina, thank you very much. It's a great pleasure to see you again. And to all our listeners and viewers, keep an eye on our website. Take care, and hopefully see you again very soon. Take care. Bye-bye. Mind your distance.